tardes. En el Salón Azul de la Facultad de Derecho de la Universidad de Buenos Aires damos comienzo al acto en el que se hará entrega del diploma y la medalla que acreditarán al profesor Jeremy Waldron como doctor honoris causa de la Universidad de Buenos Aires, según resolución del Consejo Superior Universitario número 636 del 13 de junio del 2018. El pedido de la distinción fue iniciado por el Departamento de Filosofía del Derecho, la Secretaría de Investigación de esta casa y la Asociación Argentina de Filosofía del Derecho. Pedido que fue aprobado por unanimidad por el Consejo Directivo de la Facultad de Derecho de la Universidad de Buenos Aires mediante resolución 197 de 2018. Preside este acto el decano de la Facultad de Derecho de la Universidad de Buenos Aires, el doctor Alberto Bueres. Lo acompañan en el estrado, junto al homenajeado profesor Waldron, el vicerrector de la Universidad de Buenos Aires, doctor Juan Pablo Velez, y el director del Departamento de Filosofía del Derecho, doctor Enrique Zuleta Pucceiro. A continuación, el profesor Mariano Garreta Leclerc, profesor titular de Filosofía del Derecho de esta Casa de Estudios, pronunciará la laudatio académica del profesor Jeremy Waldron.
Bueno, a ver, ¿se escucha bien? Sí. Bueno, perfecto. Bueno, señor decano de la Facultad de Derecho de la Universidad de Buenos Aires, profesor Jeremy Waldron, colegas, amigos y amigas, bueno, voy a comenzar con este texto. Con este doctorado honorífico, la Universidad de Buenos Aires homenajea al profesor Jeremy Waldron por sus inestimables contribuciones al mundo de las ideas en un amplio rango de temas y problemáticas dentro de la filosofía práctica. Jeremy Waldron es actualmente profesor de Filosofía Política y Filosofía del Derecho en la Escuela de Derecho de la Universidad de Nueva York. Fue recientemente profesor de Teoría Política y Social en la Universidad de Oxford. Con anterioridad a ello, dictó clases en la Universidad de Edimburgo, en la Universidad de California, en la Universidad de Princeton y en la Escuela de Derecho de la Universidad de Columbia. Entre otras distinciones, fue elegido miembro de la Sociedad Americana de Filosofía en 2015, miembro, eso es un poco antiguo, miembro de la Academia Británica en 2011, miembro de la Academia Americana de Artes y Ciencias en 1998. Ha recibido doctorados honoríficos de las universidades de Edimburgo, Escocia, Otago, Nueva Zelanda, que es su país natal, y la Universidad Católica de Bruselas, en Bélgica. Su vasta producción en el campo de la filosofía del derecho y la filosofía y teoría políticas incluye un gran número de libros, artículos académicos, capítulos de libros y otras publicaciones sobre temas entre los que se cuentan la democracia, los derechos liberales, el constitucionalismo, la teoría de la propiedad, la tortura, la tolerancia, el discurso del odio y la filosofía del derecho internacional. Basta para comprobarlo con pasar revista a los títulos de los libros publicados por el profesor Waldron, que son muchos. Iguales, voy a traducir los títulos. El más reciente es Iguales los unos a los otros, la base de la igualdad humana, que supongo que estará relacionado con la charla de hoy. Teoría política genuinamente política, ensayos sobre instituciones. Leyes parciales comunes a toda la humanidad, el derecho extranjero en los tribunales estadounidenses. El daño en el discurso del odio. Dignidad, rango y derechos. El Estado de Derecho y la medida de la propiedad. Tortura, terror y soluciones de compromiso, filosofía para la Casa Blanca, la tolerancia y sus límites, Dios, Locke y la igualdad, los fundamentos cristianos del pensamiento político de Locke, derecho y desacuerdo, la dignidad de la legislación, derechos liberales, que son los artículos reunidos entre 1981 y 1991, la ley, el derecho a la propiedad privada, y el primero de sus libros, Sin sentido sobre zancos, Bentham, Burke y Marx sobre los derechos del hombre. El profesor Waldron ha hecho un número importante de aportes significativos a los debates de la filosofía política y jurídica contemporánea, pero creo que podemos concentrarnos hoy, dado que intentar abarcar en el tiempo del que dispongo todos los aspectos de su producción sería imposible, en el conjunto de ideas que probablemente han tenido mayor influencia hasta el momento. Digo hasta el momento porque uno nunca sabe qué parte de la producción de un filósofo finalmente tenga más impacto. Me refiero a la novedosa y radical concepción de la legitimidad y la autoridad política que el profesor Waldron desarrolla en Derecho y Desacuerdo y la dignidad de la legislación, que son libros de 1999. Un corolario directo de esa concepción es su conocida y muy discutida crítica de las cartas de derechos y de la revisión judicial de la constitucionalidad de las leyes. La primera, comentario personal, la primera aproximación que tuvo esta teoría tuvo que ver con un texto que es bastante interesante, especialmente para nuestra comunidad académica, que es un texto del profesor Waldron, que se llama Derecho, un artículo que se llama Derecho, Desacuerdo y Deliberación, Desacuerdo y Votación, donde el profesor Waldron discute y critica la teoría de la democracia deliberativa de Carlos Nino, que como todos sabemos fue profesor de Filosofía del Derecho en esta facultad, y también en la Facultad de Filosofía y Letras de la UBA. Si queremos reconstruir la estructura fundamental de las ideas desarrolladas por el profesor Waldron en los libros mencionados, hay que partir, creo yo, de la concepción liberal de la legitimidad política, que juega, a mi juicio, un papel clave en su propuesta. Waldron afirma que nuestra concepción de la argumentación en filosofía política, en tanto se orienta a intervenir en los asuntos públicos, debe guiarse, y cito, por la idea de que las instituciones sociales, políticas y jurídicas deben ser en principio explicables y justificables ante todos aquellos que tienen que convivir con ellas. Hemos rechazado todo lo esotérico en la teoría política, los modelos teóricos del consentimiento y del contrato social y los límites correspondientes de publicidad y transparencia nos obligan a generar argumentos que intenten ser inteligibles para todo aquel cuyos intereses resultan afectados y que, en espíritu, si no en la letra, estén en consonancia con los argumentos que ellos encontrarían persuasivos en sus conversaciones con otras personas. La filosofía política contemporánea revela un compromiso con la idea de que los argumentos teóricos apuntan no solamente a justificar las leyes o las propuestas políticas, sino también a justificarlas frente a los hombres y mujeres comunes a los que van a afectar. Un poquito de agua. Perdón. Una lectura superficial de estas consideraciones podría concluir en que esta concepción de la legitimidad de la autoridad política no nos lleva muy lejos de la tradición dominante en la filosofía política occidental. Podría sostenerse de cualquier concepción de la justicia o de los derechos fundamentales, podría satisfacer esta concepción de la legitimidad. Quiero hacer aquí una digresión, una suerte de introducción apoyada en las influyentes ideas de John Rawls, para introducir y poner en cierto contexto la novedosa y radical posición que asume el profesor Waldron en relación con esta concepción de la legitimidad política. Para Rawls, la tradición dominante en la filosofía política occidental reunía en sus filas a Platón, Aristóteles, la tradición representada por Agustín y Tomás de Aquino, el utilitarismo clásico y las concepciones liberales éticas defendidas más recientemente por autores como Joseph Raz o Ronald Dworkin. Según Rawls, uno de los rasgos comunes de todas estas doctrinas consiste en la idea de que las instituciones admiten justificación solo en la medida en que promueven la concepción del bien verdadera. En realidad, continúa Rawls, desde el pensamiento griego, la tradición dominante parece haber sido la que afirma que no hay más que una concepción razonable y racional del bien. Desde la perspectiva de la tradición dominante, el objetivo de la filosofía política consiste entonces en determinar la naturaleza y el contenido del bien y a partir de allí construir una teoría de la justicia. Pero ¿por qué deberíamos concluir que las teorías filosóficas a la tradición dominante, muchas de las cuales son modernas o contemporáneas y algunas de ellas claramente liberales, resultan incapaces de cumplir con los requisitos que impone la concepción liberal de la legitimidad? ¿Acaso no apelan a argumentos inteligibles y potencialmente aceptables por todos los afectados? Rawls pensaba que la tradición dominante era incapaz de satisfacer la concepción liberal de la legitimidad, concepción que define en términos muy similares a la definición de Waldron que yo he leído. Como afirmaba Rawls, en oposición a la tradición dominante, una teoría adecuada de la justicia, lo que él denominaba una concepción política de la justicia, parte del supuesto de que hay varias doctrinas comprensivas razonables en conflicto, cada una con su concepción del bien y todas ellas compatibles con la plena racionalidad de las personas humanas. De modo que la cuestión que la tradición dominante ha tratado de responder carece de respuesta. Ninguna doctrina comprensiva resulta adecuada como concepción política de la justicia para un régimen constitucional. La explicación de este fenómeno del desacuerdo razonable, como ustedes sabrán, ha sido dada por Rawls en base a la idea de cargas de juicio que el profesor Waldron retoma en Derecho y Desacuerdo, que tiene que ver con las dificultades que encontramos para evaluar evidencias empíricas y científicas, la variedad del lenguaje moral, el lenguaje político, el hecho de que la experiencia vital particular de las personas perfila nuestras perspectivas respecto de cómo sopesar los valores políticos, etc. Todo esto genera como resultado que una de las experiencias básicas de la política en nuestro medio es que muchos de nuestros juicios más importantes son realizados, dice Rawls, en condiciones en que no es de esperar que personas conscientes, en pleno uso de sus facultades de razón, ni siquiera tras una discusión libre, arriben unánimemente a la misma conclusión. La meta del consenso es inalcanzable y el desacuerdo razonable es un dato básico y fundamental. Rawls pensaba que podía superarse esto apelando a lo que él llamaba concepciones políticas de la justicia, es decir, concepciones que, a diferencia de las concepciones comprensivas o más abarcativas del bien, religiosas, filosóficas y morales, derivaban en cierta medida de las tradiciones políticas compartidas por una comunidad democrática establecida en un territorio, en una tradición determinada. El profesor Waldron, si bien está bastante cerca de Rawls en su caracterización del fenómeno del desacuerdo razonable, que también es fundamental en su teoría, niega o discrepa con Rawls en este punto. Waldron considera, contra Rawls, que es poco realista suponer que las cargas del juicio y el hecho del desacuerdo razonable no afecten por igual tanto las doctrinas comprensivas, religiosas, filosóficas y morales, como las concepciones relativas a la justicia, la equidad y los derechos más fundamentales. La controversia razonable es ineliminable también en este terreno. Según Waldron, las concepciones políticas de la justicia no tienen ninguna ventaja respecto de las doctrinas comprensivas religiosas, filosóficas o morales frente al hecho del pluralismo. La idea de Waldron es que ninguna respuesta sustantiva, sea comprensiva o política, es capaz de satisfacer las demandas de justificación recíproca del principio liberal de la legitimidad. La respuesta de Waldron a esta encrucijada no es, sin embargo, el anarquismo, es decir, la tesis de que no existe autoridad política legítima, sino una respuesta procedimental que podríamos denominar, quizás siguiendo a David Estlund, procedimentalismo equitativo. La idea de Waldron es que las decisiones políticas deben ser reconocidas como dotadas de autoridad cuando han sido el resultado de un procedimiento deliberativo mayoritario que resulta equitativo para todos los ciudadanos y sus puntos de vista. Los procedimientos democráticos regidos por la regla de la mayoría no pueden estar subordinados a ninguna concepción sustantiva particular de la justicia, de los derechos o incluso de la democracia, porque cualquiera de estos puntos de vista estará abierto a objeciones razonables que tendrían poder de veto sobre ellos. El argumento en favor de esta radical conclusión podría resumirse en los siguientes términos, y de alguna manera estoy siguiendo en este punto a Tomás Cristiano, y podremos proceder así. Dadas las circunstancias de la política, que es un término acuñado por Waldron, los ciudadanos reconocen que existen siempre desacuerdos insalvables acerca de la justicia, y a la vez todos perciben la necesidad de establecer un curso de acción común. En dichas circunstancias, como afirma Waldron, es importante que las comunidades tomen sus decisiones en determinados foros, utilizando procedimientos que se muestren respetuosos con sus desacuerdos y que permitan que las voces en contienda sean escuchadas en un debate a partir del cual debería surgir la decisión política común, a un problema común. De modo que, y aquí reconstruyo el argumento, en las circunstancias de la política existe la necesidad de promulgar una legislación común que coordine la actividad de los ciudadanos, pero hay un desacuerdo insuperable acerca de cuál es la mejor solución al problema, es decir, la mejor legislación. Cuando hay una necesidad de tomar decisiones colectivas y desacuerdo acerca de cuál debe ser la decisión, debe apelarse a un método de decisión en el que el resultado no dependa de los supuestos méritos sustantivos de las propuestas en juego. La regla de la mayoría expresa respeto por los agentes involucrados en dos sentidos. Toma en cuenta como importantes y genuinos los desacuerdos de cada individuo y toma en cuenta a todos por igual. Un método de decisión que respeta por igual a todas las personas producirá una legislación que es digna de respeto. Por lo tanto, y esta es la conclusión, la legislación producida por la regla de la mayoría en las circunstancias de la política es merecedora de respeto y reconocimiento. Waldron extiende este argumento a la determinación del contenido de derechos liberales fundamentales como la libertad de expresión, el derecho a la privacidad, la libertad de asociación y la propiedad privada. Establece un paralelo y subraya las semejanzas entre los derechos liberales y el derecho de los derechos, según él, el derecho a la participación en los procedimientos de toma de decisión democrática. Y aquí el argumento sería más o menos así. La defensa moral del reconocimiento de los derechos liberales presupone el respeto por los juicios de los poseedores de dichos derechos, concernientes a su contenido y alcance y a los asuntos morales que surgen cuando los individuos los ejercen. Ahora bien, existe un desacuerdo acerca de la determinación de qué derechos legales liberales deben asumir y existe la necesidad de coordinar la acción sobre la base de un único conjunto de derechos liberales. Se vuelve necesario entonces un método de decisión colectiva que fije el contenido o determine la consistencia de los derechos legales liberales que no dependa de los supuestos méritos de la decisión que finalmente sea tomada. Si los juicios de las personas acerca de esta cuestión, fijar el contenido y el alcance de sus derechos, son merecedores de respeto, entonces sería una ofensa a ellas que no tuvieran una participación igual en el proceso de toma de decisión que estipulará el contenido y el alcance de sus derechos. Ahora bien, solo la regla de la mayoría da a todas las personas igual participación en el proceso colectivo de toma de decisión en las circunstancias de la política. Por lo tanto, se insulta y ofende a los individuos si no se les permite participar a través de un procedimiento regido por la regla de la mayoría en la determinación de la consistencia de sus derechos legales liberales. Estas consideraciones conceptuales fundamentales, que representan a mi juicio un paso más en el giro político de la filosofía política iniciado en trabajos como el de John Rawls, tienen diversas, aunque muy distinto por cierto, tienen diversas consecuencias institucionales derivadas. Una de las más conocidas es el rechazo por parte de Waldron de la legitimidad de otorgar una Carta de Derechos rango constitucional y de asignar al Poder Judicial la potestad de derogar leyes surgidas de las legislaturas. Waldron ofrece varios argumentos para justificar esta tesis. Una de las ideas centrales es que la interpretación por parte de una Corte de una Carta de Derechos requiere que los miembros de dicho cuerpo apliquen sus propios y controvertidos estándares de justicia para tomar las decisiones. De este modo, estaría desconociéndose el igual respeto que debe darse a los puntos de vista de todos los afectados. La base de justificación para considerar que una minoría de expertos debería de decidir por todos depende de considerar normalmente que las legislaturas no son suficientemente confiables a la hora de determinar cuáles son los derechos de las personas. Sin embargo, las habilidades morales demandadas incluso a los ciudadanos ordinarios en la vida democrática son similares a las habilidades morales que necesitan para ejercer sus derechos liberales. La atribución de derechos liberales a las personas implica que se confíen sus habilidades morales para interpretar lo que implican o demandan esos derechos. Si confiamos en las habilidades morales de las personas, debemos confiar también en dichas habilidades cuando los agentes participan del proceso democrático que conduce, por ejemplo, a establecer una interpretación de lo que los derechos liberales requieren frente a un conflicto político determinado. Por lo tanto, las razones que podríamos tener para justificar una Carta de Derechos y la revisión judicial de la constitucionalidad de las leyes por parte de un cuerpo de expertos, es decir, la incapacidad de los individuos ordinarios y sus representantes para interpretar las implicaciones de sus derechos en casos difíciles, son incompatibles con las bases de los derechos liberales. que son inseparables del reconocimiento a todos los individuos de las habilidades morales requeridas para comprenderlos y actuar de acuerdo con ellos. Waldron apela en su crítica a la institución de la revisión judicial a argumentos adicionales, a varios argumentos adicionales. No puedo aquí resumirlos todos, pero voy a mencionar algunos que me parecen importantes. En primer lugar, Waldron llama la atención sobre el derecho de que los desacuerdos, sobre el hecho de que los desacuerdos que encontramos en la opinión pública y en las legislaturas se reproducen en las Cortes. Los jueces de la Corte Suprema suelen discrepar entre sí de modos no sustancialmente diferentes a los del resto de los ciudadanos. El desacuerdo razonable en torno a cuestiones constitucionales fundamentales y la imposibilidad de resolverlo apelando a consideraciones sustantivas y al diálogo o la deliberación reaparece en la Corte Suprema, y el modo de superarlo es nuevamente la regla de la mayoría. Los jueces resuelven sus desacuerdos votando. El hecho de que el recurso a la regla de la mayoría resulte aceptable dentro de los tribunales prueba que la legitimidad de ese procedimiento para decidir en contextos de incertidumbre es ampliamente reconocida. Ahora bien, si en la Corte que no posee el grado de legitimidad democrática de las legislaturas, las decisiones dependen también de la regla de la mayoría, ¿por qué no dejar entonces la interpretación de los derechos fundamentales a las instituciones que ostentan el mayor grado de legitimidad y representatividad democráticas, es decir, a las legislaturas? En relación con este último punto, y esto constituye otro argumento, Waldron cuestiona el supuesto de que la revisión judicial funcione siempre mejor al evaluar los resultados de las legislaturas, y examina una serie de casos históricos donde la Corte Suprema Norteamericana, como entre Scott, Schenck y etcétera, se producen resultados que son a todas luces inaceptables y que probablemente no hubieran pasado una legislatura en condiciones apropiadas. A ello se suma, para Waldron, el hecho de que en países en los que no hubo una tradición de revisión constitucional o de revisión judicial, como Inglaterra y Holanda, estos países han sido sumamente exitosos, tanto como los Estados Unidos, a la hora de garantizar los derechos individuales de sus ciudadanos. En una cultura política que ha tenido un desarrollo apropiado, la inexistencia de instituciones contramayoritarias no tiene por qué conducir a la temida tiranía de la mayoría. Parece también razonable, y creo que testeable hasta cierto punto de la perspectiva empírica, que cuando la cultura política de una sociedad se aparta del respeto de los derechos liberales fundamentales, una corte y una carta de derechos son un límite muy débil para revertir esa tendencia. Waldron también cuestiona, y por último, la idea, por último en esta exposición, no en su obra, la idea de que el razonamiento judicial asociado a la interpretación de una carta de derechos sea apto para mejorar o enriquecer el proceso de liberación democrática. La existencia de una carta de derechos puede tener, siguiendo con el ejemplo de Estados Unidos, un impacto problemático sobre las deliberaciones. Por ejemplo, en el contexto de la Suprema Corte de los Estados Unidos, el caso del aborto no puede ser discutido sin incursionar en complejas discusiones sobre la cláusula del debido proceso. La estipulación de una carta de derechos quita libertad al debate. Este puede centrarse en ocasiones en el problema de establecer el verdadero significado de los términos incorporados en la Constitución, lo que aleja a los participantes, por supuesto, de los aspectos cruciales de la discusión. Las cartas de derechos suelen tomar, y no para bien, vida propia, como afirma Waldron, y en las naciones liberales, donde existe un procedimiento de revisión constitucional, donde no existe un procedimiento de revisión constitucional, por el contrario, los ciudadanos y los parlamentos pueden discutir los problemas apelando a las razones políticas directamente involucradas, y cito a Waldron, una cita bastante fuerte, libres del verbalismo obsesivo de una determinada carta de derechos. Aunque el profesor Waldron ha matizado y precisado su posición crítica respecto de la revisión constitucional y de las cartas de derechos, quise presentar la versión de derecho de desacuerdo, que es la versión más fuerte probablemente, para que podamos evaluarla desde esa perspectiva. Creo que es muy importante no perder de vista que esta posición, que ha tenido una gran influencia en el debate contemporáneo, se apoya en la original y radical interpretación de los requisitos de la legitimidad y la autoridad política defendida por el profesor Waldron en dicha obra, que intenté reconstruir previamente y que caractericé como un paso más en el giro político de la filosofía política, perdón por las repeticiones de política. Está de más decir que se trata de una de las problemáticas centrales y más básicas que enfrenta la disciplina. Consecuentemente, dada su originalidad, plausibilidad y la meticulosa argumentación con la que es defendida, la propuesta del profesor Waldron debe ser reconocida como un aporte de un valor inestimable dentro del horizonte de la filosofía política contemporánea. Y esto es solamente uno de los aportes, y aquí termino. Muchas gracias.
A continuación, el decano de la Facultad de Derecho de la Universidad de Buenos Aires, doctor Alberto Bueres, hará entrega al profesor Jeremy Waldron del diploma y la medalla que lo acreditan como doctor honoris causa de la Universidad de Buenos Aires. Seguidamente, el doctor Jeremy Waldron dictará su lectio magistralis titulada El valor distintivo de la dignidad humana.
Thank you, Dean Bueres. Thank you, Mariano, for that very flattering account of the work that I've been doing on justice and judicial review. Thank you, Juan Pablo Alonso, for organizing this trip and all the events that have been involved. It is a huge honor to accept this doctorate. I am flattered. I am pleased, I feel humbled by it, and I hope that what I'm going to say this evening will not convince you that this was a terrible mistake. But I want to talk a little bit about a topic that is somewhat different from judicial review, although it involves the work of courts. Because as well as having a view about who should make which decisions, I also, like everybody else, have a view about what decisions should be made. I also have a theory of justice. I also have a theory of rights. I just don't believe that it should be imposed by judges where there is reasonable disagreement. But tonight, I want to speak about the content of my theory of rights. For the past 10 years, much of my writing and a very considerable amount of my teaching at New York University has been focused on the topic of human dignity. It's sometimes involved work in abstract philosophy, but also work in quite vivid areas of public policy and legal contestation. In my human dignity seminar and in my writing, I go back and forth between abstract philosophy and the hard work of legal decision-making in particular cases, and I'm going to share some of that back and forth, that interplay between philosophy and case law here with you this evening. As you know, the preambles to the great charters and declarations of rights, the Universal Declaration of 1948, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights from 1967, those preambles associate dignity very closely with rights. They talk about our civilization's recognition of the dignity and equal and inalienable rights of all members of the human family, and they appear to commit us to the proposition, in the words of the Covenant, that human rights actually derive from the inherent dignity of the human person. Where there are rights, there is dignity. Where dignity is recognized, then we should expect to find respect for human rights. The jurisprudence of dignity, as we shall see, is a particular way of thinking about rights, and I want to talk about the distinctive character of that way of thinking about rights. It's not just international charters. National constitutions also mention dignity as a foundational value. The best example of this, in its reaction to the horrors and criminality of the Nazi era, the 1948 Basic Law of Germany made human dignity a fundamental principle, insisting that all other laws and all other rights must be seen through the lens of human dignity. This is Article 1, subsection 1 of the German Basic Law. And that first principle has a very considerable impact on the rest of German law. Some of the cases that I will give you will be cases from Germany. But it's not just Germany. The 1993 Constitution of South Africa cites human dignity as one of a small set of values on which the new republic in that land, the post-apartheid republic, is founded. The other values are equality, the advancement of human rights, non-racialism, non-sexism, the supremacy of the Constitution, the rule of law, and democratic government with universal suffrage. And these values were not just made up by philosophers. These were values whose importance was measured in blood in the struggle against apartheid. More than 150 nations mention dignity in their constitutions, though admittedly in some it is not much more than a passing reference. That's true of the Argentine constitution. The Constitution of Argentina alludes to the concept of dignity just once, as far as I'm aware, in relation to conditions of work. I'm referring to the requirement of section 14 bis, that the law shall ensure to workers dignified and equitable working conditions. Dignified and equitable working conditions. And I'm going to come back to this a little later, because I think even though it's just one mention, it's an important one. In one or two countries, the place of human dignity in constitutional law is secured by judge-made doctrine rather than by the constitutional text. In Canada, for example, there's no mention of dignity in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, but it has had a major premise, nevertheless, in the interpretation of rights to equality and in end-of-life issues such as assisted suicide. In the assisted suicide cases, the Canadian Supreme Court said that an individual's response to a grievous and irremediable medical condition is a matter critical to their dignity and to their autonomy, and it's protected by their fundamental right to liberty and security of the person. That use of human dignity in judicial doctrine without any explicit textual basis has actually been a major feature of the career of dignity and its presence in constitutional jurisprudence around the world. So too in the United States, where I live and where I do my work, the Supreme Court of the United States, without benefit of any mention of dignity in the text of the American Constitution, it's not in the Bill of Rights, it's not in the 1787 Constitution. Nevertheless, the Supreme Court has invoked dignity repeatedly as a concept necessary to make sense of the Eighth Amendment. I say Eighth Amendment, it's the amendment that prohibits cruel and unusual punishment. That role of dignity is probably best known from the debates about capital punishment in the 1970s. But long before Furman against Georgia, and quite apart from capital punishment, it was established law that the Eighth Amendment was all about dignity. The relevant case here, and this is the first of the cases I want to give you, was a case called Trope against Dulles, decided in 1958. Dulles was John Foster Dulles, who was the Secretary of State. Albert Trope was a man who, when he applied for a passport in 1952, was told that his American citizenship had been revoked on account of his desertion from the army during wartime military service in North Africa. In 1942, apparently, during the war, he had escaped from the stockade where he had been imprisoned for some earlier breach of discipline. Heading towards Casablanca, he was quickly apprehended and sentenced to 3 years hard labor and a dishonorable discharge from the army. But it also turned out in 1952, when he tried to get a passport, that he had been dishonorably discharged from the United States as well, and that his citizenship had been revoked. He was quite surprised when this additional penalty of denationalization was brought to his attention 10 years later. Well, the Supreme Court of the United States struck down that additional penalty Chief Justice Warren said this in his opinion for the court. The basic concept underlying the Eighth Amendment is nothing less than the dignity of man. The use of denationalization as a punishment is barred by the Eighth Amendment. There may be involved no physical mistreatment, no primitive torture, but there is instead the total destruction of the individual's status in organized society. This punishment strips the citizen of his status in the national and international political community. His very existence is at the sufferance of the country in which he happens to find himself. While any one country may accord him some rights, no country need do so because he's stateless. In short, the expatriate has lost the right to have rights. This last phrase was strikingly reminiscent of what Hannah Arendt was arguing in The Origins of Totalitarianism when she dealt with the topic of statelessness. It's a very bold move that the Supreme Court made, or two moves that they made. First of all, they associated dignity as a matter of interpretation with cruel and unusual punishment. That's the abstract connection. And secondly, dignity was associated with citizenship. Itself, dignity is a status concept, status in the moral community, if you like. But they saw that human dignity demanded that the moral status of a human being should be given reality in the legal status of citizenship. So that was Trope against Dulles. Those moves were all the more striking because they were made without benefit of any canonical definition of dignity in American jurisprudence. It's not in the text, and it's not been given any official definition. Indeed, official use of this concept in constitutions and international charters of rights all around the world is still uncontaminated by any attempt at official definition. A respected rights jurist at Columbia Law School, now sadly no longer with us, Oscar Schachter, once observed of human dignity that its intrinsic meaning has been left to intuitive understanding. So on what basis do we figure out how to use this term? Because it sounds pompous, it sounds grandiose, and pompous and grandiose terms have a tendency to get out of hand. Does it actually have a meaning? Or is it just a piece of decoration? Christopher McCrudden suggests that dignity was written into the preambles of the great human rights covenants, specifically the Universal Declaration, not to convey any particular meaning, but to operate as a sort of placeholder in circumstances where the drafters wanted to sound all very grand and philosophical, but couldn't agree on what to say. So they said, say human dignity. And this lack of a canonical definition has been annoying to many critics of the concept. Steven Pinker, a great social thinker, wrote a book on the decline of violence in modern society. Steven Pinker called dignity a subjective and squishy notion. And Ruth Macklin has called it hopelessly vague and said that invoking the concept of dignity in normative argument without clarifying its meaning is to use a mere slogan. A mere slogan. Are these fair criticisms? Well, in one way they are. It's a concept that can get out of hand. But I also suspect the good faith of those who are calling for a definition. It's as though they wanted to make human dignity manageable, to make it a calculable quantity, so that we can push up against the envelope and perhaps accept that everything that's not dignified, that does not threaten dignity, is okay. It's like an academic professor, a sexual predator, saying to his dean, well, tell me what I can do with my students. Tell me how far I can go with my students. So I need to have clarity about this, so I know exactly how far I can go. There are some edges and envelopes you shouldn't be pushing at all, and maybe it's important that dignity is not pinned down in a definition, but rather allows insights into respect for our humanity to be generated in new and disconcerting ways. If you were to listen to critics like Pinker and Macklin, you might infer that it's up to us whether we continue to use this term dignity or not. We have attached ourselves to it, we liked it for a while, we can drop it if we want to. I don't think this is possible. All the legal talk of dignity in the great charters of rights, it's there anyway, and we have no choice but to come to terms with it and to try to figure out what to do with it. And on the philosophical side, the presence of dignity in our moral vocabulary is not the result of any individual's willful effort to bring grandeur and pomposity and obscurity into morality. Human dignity is there already, delivered to us by our philosophical traditions, from Cicero to Kant, or stretching back in the other direction from Jacques Maritain to Pico della Mirandola. Human dignity may not have a ready-made definition, but it has come to us as a heritage of moral thinking. A heritage of moral thinking with a history of our attempts over the centuries to say what is special and momentous and worthy of particular respect in the human person. And I think it would be ill-advised to simply drop it just because it is not initially and immediately clear. The details of that philosophical heritage can make an important practical difference, and I want to illustrate the importance of the concept's Kantian heritage, the work of Immanuel Kant, in a case from Germany. This is known as the airline aviation safety case. One striking feature of the 9/11 terrorist atrocities in the United States was lack of clarity as to whether the military forces had authority to shoot down the airliners that had been taken over. You remember the airliners were full of passengers, they were controlled by terrorists, and eventually they were flown into the side of great buildings, killing thousands of people in those buildings. And for a period there was some question whether the Air Force should be mobilized to shoot down those terrorist-controlled aircraft. Because after all, if they did hit the World Trade Center and the Pentagon and the Capitol, which was also the target, then the hundreds or thousands of people would be blown up, sometimes exceeding by a factor of 4 or 5 the number of people on board the airline. So in the soul searching that followed 9/11, some countries sought to make that authority explicit in their law, so that the kind of paralyzing uncertainty that affected the United States Air Force, portrayed as a very powerful sub-theme in Paul Greenglass's movie United 93, which I thoroughly recommend, would not happen again. One such country was Germany, and in 2005 the Bundestag enacted a statute called the Aviation Security Act, which stipulated in Article 14 that the direct use of armed force against the aircraft is permissible in cases where the aircraft is intended to be used as a weapon against human lives, and where the direct use of armed force is the only method to avert this imminent danger. So that was the law. And as you might expect, associations representing pilots and flight attendants and regular airline passengers filed suit to challenge this provision under a German constitutional process that permits ex-ante hypothetical challenges. Their claim, of course, was based on the right to life of the innocent people on board the airplane. Why should they be shot down by government forces? But it wasn't just the right to life, because if it had just been the right to life, the government could have responded, well, there's the right to life of a few hundred people on the airplane, and there's the right to life of a few thousand people in the building. Yeah? So it's a balance of right to life versus right to life. The challenge and the decision of the German Constitutional Court depended on an insistence that the right to life must be seen through the lens of the provision of the German Basic Law that I've already mentioned, the primal provision of Article 1.1 that says human dignity shall be inviolable. To respect and protect it shall be the duty of all state authority. It was respect for dignity that led to an insistence that the state may not protect a majority of its citizens by intentionally killing a minority, in this case the crew and passengers of the airplane. And the court accepted this contention that the dignity provision made a difference to the way we think about the right to life. The dignity provision made a difference to the way we think about the right to life. Germans take Article 1.1 very seriously. They treat it as a Kantian conception. And the court suggested that the Air Safety Act contemplated using the innocent lives on board as a means to protect the innocent lives in the targeted building. You remember Kant says you must never use human beings as a means, but always as ends to themselves. Actually, that wasn't a correct analysis. What's the German Air Force? Is it still the Luftwaffe? Whoever would be shooting down the airplane would not be using the passengers. They would just be destroying the passengers, wasn't making use of them. But the crucial thing, the crucial separate Kantian doctrine was about the arithmetic of consequentialism. The state may not kill people just because they are fewer in number than the ones whom the state hopes to save by their being killed. The Kantian element involved here is just the understanding of the dignity of human life as having infinite value. So you can't just trade off one life against another in the way that this happens. Human life has infinite value. Should it worry us that the idea of human dignity comes trailing a religious as well as a philosophical heritage? In Evangelium Vitae, an encyclical of Pope John Paul II, we are told about the almost divine dignity of every human being. Man, said Pope John Paul, although formed from the dust of the earth, is a manifestation of God in the world, a sign of his presence, a trace of his glory. Man has been given a sublime dignity based on the intimate bond which unites him to his Creator. In man there shines forth a reflection of God himself. We're created in the image of God. The dignity of this life is linked not only to its beginning, the fact that it comes from God, but also to its final end, to its destiny of fellowship with God in knowledge and love of him. That's the words of the encyclical. Those are stirring words, but what are we to make of them in a society where some people hold Catholic theology and some people are atheists? Or when some people are Christians and others are Muslims and others are Jews? Is there a place for a concept that seems to have this degree of transcendent religious content? Is dignity, are the claims of human dignity inevitably and ultimately religious, which sure sounds like it when you're talking about human life having ultimate and intimate and infinite value? Turn it around the other way. Is it possible to have a secular version of human dignity? I suspect that some writers' hostility to human dignity is associated with its religious overtones. There's concern among philosophers about the return or the infiltration of religiously loaded ideas into moral and political analysis. Just when we thought we got rid of them, now they all come flooding back in the Trojan horse of human dignity. Commenting in 2008 on the use of the concept of dignity by members of Bush's panel on bioethics, Steven Pinker exclaimed incredulously, "How did the United States, the world's scientific powerhouse, reach a point at which it grapples with the ethical challenges of 21st century biomedicine, using Bible stories and Catholic doctrine and woolly rabbinical allegories?" That's what the use of human dignity portends in some people's eyes. And if we can't get rid of it or suppress its use in the name of public reason, they hope that we can come up with a secularized version. Personally, I have no difficulty with a religiously loaded concept of human dignity, but many people quite reasonably do. And we have to think about whether a secular version is available. Steven Pinker wonders whether the term dignity could not be replaced with autonomy. It's another nice word. It's something that we're all in favor of. And it seems clearer than dignity, because autonomy seems to hook up with the idea of choice and free will and so on. Actually, autonomy is not all that straightforward, as anybody who's read the work of Joseph Raz understands. But it does have a clear connection with the privileging of choice and with informed consent. And Steven Pinker wonders whether it's plausible to suppose that dignity can really stand for any value other than that. Either it's about autonomy or it's nonsense, one or the other. Well, is dignity just a matter of autonomy? Here's another case, this time from France. On October the 25th, 1991, in a French town on the southern suburbs of Paris, the municipal police decided to close down an entertainment in a bar centering around the activity of dwarf tossing. Do they have dwarf tossing in Argentina? This is an activity in a bar where in a long, narrow room.
No.
You do not have it. Thank you. Big burly men who are drinking their beer grab hold of a person who suffers from dwarfism, a little person, a dwarf, and the person is rigged out with a little strap and harness and handle so that you can get a good grip. And the big man will pick up this little person and see how far he can throw him down the corridor. The corridor is lined with mattresses. And then another man will come up with a different dwarf and see how far he can throw him. And a winner will be declared, all the time to the raucous applause of other drunken men who are watching this. The dwarf wears a helmet and other protective gear and a little harness with handles that enables the throwers to hold him and throw him. So the police, you might think quite rightly, closed that show down on grounds of public order, claiming that public order in France doesn't just include non-violence. Public order includes human dignity. Public order includes respect for the human person. Well, the organizers of the event appealed to the Versailles Administrative Tribunal, which overturned the police order, but the city appealed to France's highest administrative court, the Conseil d'État. And the Conseil d'État upheld the original police order, holding that respect for the dignity of the human person is indeed one of the elements of public order, and that dwarf tossing by its very object, quote, using as a missile a physically handicapped person who is presented as such, undermines human dignity, and therefore that the municipality may and perhaps must exercise its police powers to ban the activity. Well, that indicates very importantly, I think, the gap between human dignity and autonomy, because there was no indication that autonomy was being violated. The dwarf in question had agreed, he was very handsomely paid for participating in this exhibition. Everybody who participated seemed to be a consenting adult. People knew what was going on and they consented to what was happening. The dignitarian intervention stopped these consenting adults from doing what they had chosen to do. And the challenge is to explain the reason for that. Opinions differ about the ban on dwarf tossing. But I hope this is the case with my audience here tonight. Even those who oppose the ban feel some uneasiness about the activity, especially in its deliberately transgressive nature and the degradation that it seems to involve. And that degradation may transfer from the little people involved in the context to little people generally in the community. There is such a thing as respect, not just for what people choose, but for what people are. And there is such a thing as degradation of what people are, which doesn't just consist in the denial of choice. This talk of degradation may seem moralistic, especially as it applies sometimes in cases of sexual activity. Let's go to Germany again, to a case that is known as the German peep show case, where the Federal Administrative Tribunal of Germany held that a woman exposing herself in a peep show for the benefit, if that's what it is, of anonymous men watching without being seen, that was a violation of human dignity. And the tribunal went further and said the fact that the woman is a willing participant in this exhibition makes it worse as degradation, not better as degradation. So human dignity is helping us apply the concept of degradation, which I believe we need in human rights law, and maybe not in the sex cases, but we certainly need it. We needed it when the United States was degrading detainees at Guantanamo Bay. We need a notion of inhuman and degrading treatment in that context. And we know that in that context, the key to the degradation was not the involuntariness of the procedures, but the actual contempt for human being and human nature that was involved. Of course, people will disagree about particular cases, including the peep show case, the dwarf tossing case, and a 2002 South African decision that characterized sex work as an infringement of dignity on the part of the sex worker. But we do need a concept of degradation, and we have to think about how we work with the concept of degradation and the work that human dignity entitles us to do. Or think of another aspect of degradation altogether, the degradation of the conditions of some people's lives when they are living in dire poverty. One area where we need the distinctive value of dignity and a distinctive norm of non-degradation is in our analysis of living conditions. I think it's a mistake to associate dignity exclusively with negative freedom, that is, exclusively with liberties like those contained in the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. That's what the equation of dignity with autonomy tends to do. Don't get me wrong, civil and political rights are very important, but they're not the only important things in the world. Economic and social rights are important as well, and this is an underexplored area of dignity jurisprudence. Article 23 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights insists that everyone who works has the right to just and favorable remuneration, ensuring for himself and his family an existence worthy of human dignity. People have a right to remuneration that assures them an existence worthy of human dignity. Not a bare animal existence. Not a bare existence where you're scrabbling with roots and leaves to try to get some nutrition. It's not just a requirement of adequate shelter and nutrition. It conveys the thought that humans, even of the lowest class, have an inherent nobility that ought to be reflected in the style of life they are able to guarantee for themselves by their work. Their way of living should be such as to elicit the respect due to human beings as such, and again the contrast is with a degraded, animalistic existence. The same might be said about conditions of labour. There is hard, dirty, difficult work to be done in the lower echelons of any economy. So special attention needs to be paid to the dignity of such work, ensuring not only that the people doing it are properly safeguarded and properly remunerated, but that they enjoy what the Constitution of Argentina calls dignified and equitable working conditions. Dignified and equitable working conditions. Again, this is not a concern that autonomy by itself will take care of. This is distinctive work that human dignity and non-degradation have to do. Talk of the dignity of labour has been a major theme of the tradition for a long, long time, a century or more. It's not just about the worth of labour, it's not just about the contribution that labour makes in the economy, it's not even just about the remuneration of labour, it's the conditions of life, of human life, of this precious form of human life, even at the lower echelons of the economy. Now, there's parts, and just for the benefit of the translators, I'm going to move through and drop parts 9 and 10, because time is getting short and we don't want to stay here all night. But I want to come finally to a couple of cases. We're now on page 24. Our insistence on the distinctive value of human dignity, equal dignity, faces its sternest test when it confronts those whom we are tempted to demonize and maybe to bestialize, wrongdoers in our midst. I have heard people complain, students complain, colleagues complain. Are you really saying that a terrorist or a Nazi has the same human dignity as the rest of us? Are you really saying that a torturer or an Adolf Hitler has human dignity? The answer is yes. That's why it's a challenge. Though dignity is by no means all there is to say about the moral and legal evaluation of Adolf Hitler. It may not clinch the decision in cases where it's under consideration. But the first thing to say about a terrorist or a Nazi or a torturer or Adolf Hitler is that they are humans and they are bearers of human dignity. So consider another difficult and troubling case, this time from Israel. In December 2005, the Supreme Court of Israel, sitting as the High Court of Justice, considered the Israeli government's policy of targeted killing. You know, targeted killing where you send drones or you send death squads out to assassinate particular people. Particularly you may be sending them out to kill people who are known terrorists even during the time that they are relaxing at home, working in their garage in the West Bank or whatever. So by targeted killing, I mean preventative strikes aimed at killing members of terrorist organizations, even when they are not actively engaged in terrorist activities. In a long and very thoughtful opinion, the President Emeritus of the Israeli Supreme Court, who is sitting as its president, Aaron Barak, not Prime Minister Barak, but Aaron Barak, rejected the absolutism of the petitioner's contention that targeted killing was always wrong. He said, you can't rule out that sometimes this may need to be done. You can't rule out the right of the Israeli military to sometimes use force against people who had engaged in and intended to continue engaging in acts of terrorism. There's no alternative, said Justice Barak, but to approach these situations on a case-by-case basis. He thought that in certain circumstances, targeted killing might be permissible if other forms of interdiction, prevention, and arrest were not possible, especially if the number of projected civilian casualties was limited, and particularly genuinely dealing with somebody who was sallying out to conduct terrorist operations and coming back into civilian territory for refuge. So Justice Barak gave a complex, nuanced judgment in the matter, refused to condemn targeted killing outright. But I'm not concerned with the details of what he said in conclusion, but rather with two premises which President Barak said were essential in considering the case. The first premise was familiar. Terrorist activity poses a desperate threat to the Israeli people and to Israeli society. This was 2005, before the recent lull in bombings. Israel in this period had been paying a terrible price on the innocent lives of its own people as a result of hundreds of terrorist attacks directed against it. That was premise number one. The second premise I'm going to quote exactly as he said, well, he said it in bottom Hebrew, quoted in English, and you will translate it into Spanish. He said, needless to say, unlawful combatants, which is what he called the terrorists, needless to say, unlawful combatants are not beyond the law. God created them as well in his image. Their human dignity as well is to be honored. They as well enjoy and are entitled to protection by customary international law. Needless to say, but perhaps it was necessary to say it anyway, and to say it in these striking terms from the bench of the Israeli Supreme Court. God created the terrorists in his image as well. Just not to settle the matter, but to pull us up short, stop us in our tracks for our enthusiasm for killing these men, to remind us that although we are dealing with an evil person who will kill and maim scores of innocent persons if he's given the opportunity, nevertheless, we are dealing with a bearer of God-given dignity. Not a credit to the human race, of course, but a member of it anyway, with the worth and the status that this implies. Even if we are talking about someone who is justly liable through his actions to deadly force, we're not just talking about some human beast, which, as John Locke once put it, may be destroyed like a lion or a tiger, one of those wild, savage beasts with whom man can have neither society nor security. We're not dealing with a good animal gone bad, or an outsider to our species, something that may be manipulated, battered, exploited as a mere tool for our own purposes. The terrorist may be an evil and dangerous man, but he is an evil and dangerous man created in the image of God. And the status associated with that characterization imposes constraints on how lightly we may consider the question of what may be done with it. Now again, Justice Barak was not saying this is conclusive of the matter. This is like a warning to us to be careful in our thinking about targeted killing. Not to take it lightly, not to dismiss it out of hand maybe, but not to simply impose it. The principle of human dignity, even of a terrorist, limits what we can do to the suspect. It limits the punishments we can impose. It places limits on how we interrogate them, limits that the United States violated in the years after 9/11, limits nonetheless. It limits the peremptoriness with which we can dispose of them, and it limits how casually we can make decisions in cases about targeted killing. Justice Barak brought this up under the auspices of the proposition that God created the terrorists in his image, just in order to pull us up short, and not to settle the matter, but to insist that the greatest consideration has to be taken with this judgment. He expressed it in those religious terms, and I mentioned earlier the problem of whether there's a secular version of it. I think sometimes people who have religious belief express things in that language because they want to convey somehow, and this is the best way they know how, the massive importance they associate with a particular value. And others who lack that religious belief may dismiss the particular theological rhetoric, but they should still take seriously the massive commitment, the massive ethical commitment that it involves. Well, it's time to draw this lecture, you will be glad to hear, to a close. I've tried to illustrate various philosophical propositions about the distinctive value of human dignity by reference to the vivid content and implications of actual cases from around the world, from France, from Germany, from Israel, from the United States. The cases show dignity in action, challenging the complacency associated with more familiar values like autonomy. They illustrate the myriad ways in which people have drawn upon the heritage associated with dignity to express their respect for humanity. I think it's apparent from these cases that dignity is not just a term of decoration. It adds distinctive and sometimes quite controversial value to the legal arguments in which it figures. Some may see its implications as extravagant. Many people feel that about the German aviation safety case. Some might think of it as objectionably moralistic, as in the peep show case. We should certainly ask ourselves how, in the absence of a definition, one goes about showing in a courtroom that a particular use of human dignity goes too far. Does dignity always get out of hand? Well, here's one last case to discuss, and then I'll sit down. It involves a convicted German war criminal, Nazi. In 1986, a man who, as a member of the SS, had participated in a large number of selections and killings of persons at Auschwitz, including children and pregnant women, applied to the German authorities for release from a sentence of life imprisonment, of which he had served more than 22 years. He claimed that further enforcement of his life sentence would be a violation of human dignity, inasmuch as it would imply that he was beyond redemption. Which is important because, particularly in the Kantian tradition, human dignity is predicated on the possession by everybody of moral capacities that make moral action and moral redemption possible, even if people have not used it so far. And his plea was in pursuance of a doctrine that the German courts have promoted, that it's incompatible with the provision on human dignity in the basic law for the state forcefully to deprive a person of his freedom forever, without at least providing him the chance to someday regain that freedom. In the United States, we do this all the time. We sentence people to 500 years in prison without the possibility of parole. There is now a similar doctrine in the jurisprudence of the European Convention on Human Rights. I wouldn't be surprised if there is something similar in the inter-American jurisprudence on human rights. It doesn't deny that the people concerned are deserving of punishment, but the view is that prison authorities have a duty to strive towards a prisoner's rehabilitation, even one sentenced to imprisonment for life, for the most heinous crimes, and that the possibility of release after rehabilitation is constitutionally required in any community that establishes human dignity as its centerpiece. People must be given a chance at redemption. Whole life sentences, therefore, are no longer acceptable on this view, given the link between human dignity and respect for moral capacity and the prospect of redemption that generates. Well, the principle is a reasonable enough inference from the idea of human dignity, but what about its application in the case of this war criminal? Well, he'd made his application for release. Prison officials had approved it in 1982 when he was 88 years old, but the Frankfurt Higher Regional Court disallowed the release owing to the gravity of the crime, and the German Constitutional Court upheld that judgment because the higher court had properly weighed the factors relevant to a decision to release against the constitutional respect owed to human dignity. In reaching this conclusion, the court agreed in principle that the right of human dignity may not be denied to an offender, notwithstanding the barbarity of the crime. There must be some prospect of eventual release. Still, taking into account the gravity of the war criminal's offences and the fact that he had shown no remorse from them, despite having lived in freedom from 1945 to 1962 when he was incarcerated, the Second Senate of the German Constitutional Court was willing to accept continued imprisonment for at least a few more years. Dignity is an important value, but it's working alongside other values. And we have to credit both sets of values when we are exploring the distinctive importance of human dignity. It's no affront to human dignity that the principles it generates are sometimes limited in this way. The jurisprudence of human dignity is very much a work in progress, and as we proceed with it, we will need to see its distinctive value operating more clearly in genuine interaction with other values. Maybe it's even in the dwarf tossing case, there is an interplay between questions of autonomy and questions of non-degradation. In any case, I hope I've been able to provide some illustrations of the way this work in progress is unfolding and of some of the issues and some of the complexities and challenges that it gives rise to. This is a sample of the work that I've been doing, and once again, more than anything else, I want to thank you for your attention and thank you for this honor that you've done. Thank you very much.
Ya estamos terminando. Simplemente simplemente una anécdota. Contacté a Jeremy Waldron hace un año para invitarlo a las jornadas de la Asociación Argentina de Filosofía del Derecho a través de un amigo en común. Iba a venir pocos días, 4 días hábiles, para dar una conferencia. Bueno, se empezaron a sumar actividades y lo que iba a ser una conferencia inicial terminaron siendo una conferencia en un congreso de Derecho Público, un workshop sobre la obra de Jeremy Waldron que fue ayer a la mañana que duró más de 4 horas, una charla en la Corte Suprema de Justicia hoy a la mañana de más de 2 horas y esta lección magistral que nos acaba de dar. Y si eso fuera poco, los alumnos, los estudiantes de esta facultad que tienen la revista Lecciones y Ensayo quisieron hacerle una entrevista y Jeremy Waldron aceptó generosamente. En todas las oportunidades ha demostrado ser una persona generosa con su tiempo, una persona dispuesta a discutir su teoría, atenta a las objeciones, a las preguntas y a los interrogantes. Así que muchas gracias, Jeremy, por tu tiempo y esperemos que este, que es tu tercer viaje a Argentina, simplemente no sea el último. Muchas gracias.